The great throne hall of Emberfall Citadel smelled of burning cedar and old dragon blood. Black stone pillars rose like the ribs of a long-dead god, and the floor beneath the Dragon King's throne was carved with runes that had not glowed in centuries. Today, the entire court had gathered to watch a servant be punished. In the center of the hall, directly beneath the obsidian throne, knelt Lirael Voss. The guards were locking heavy chains of blackened iron around her wrists and ankles. The cold metal bit into her skin with every small movement, sending sharp, burning pain shooting up her arms and into her shoulders. She kept her spine straight, refusing to let the nobles see the tremor in her fingers or the way her heart hammered against her ribs. The iron rings clinked as they locked into the stone floor. The cold metal pressed against her skin, heavy as the years of silent service she had given this court. She felt the eyes of every noble like needles on her skin, but she locked her knees and refused to lower her head. King Kaelen Draven sat upon the throne above her, tall and severe in armor the color of cooled lava. His voice carried through the hall without effort. "You raised your hand against a noble," he said. "Today you will remember your place." Lirael kept her eyes on the black stone beneath her knees. The chains pulled taut. The iron cut into her wrists until warm blood trickled down her arms. The pain was sharp, but she focused on it, letting it ground her. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She did not regret protecting the boy. Not even now. The boy had only been 12. Lord Dravener had ordered him beaten for spilling wine. Lirael had stepped between them without thinking. Now she knelt here, beneath the throne, as punishment. Lord Dravener stood to the right of the throne, his smile widening as he watched her chained form. His fingers brushed the hilt of the ceremonial dagger at his belt, the same blade he had used years ago to silence those who once questioned his growing influence over the young king. "The court needs to see that no one is above dragon law," Lord Dravener said smoothly, "especially those without a dragon of their own." Kaelen looked down at Lirael. For a brief moment, his gaze lingered on the faint scar just above her collarbone, the one he had given her years ago when she had thrown herself in front of a stray arrow meant for him during a hunt. He looked away first. "Chaining her beneath the throne will serve as a clear reminder," he said. The final chain locked into place with a heavy click. The iron was so tight it cut off circulation in her wrists. Sharp pain pulsed up her arms, but she kept her breathing slow and even. She pressed her palms flat against the cold black stone, feeling its chill seep into her skin. Kaelen remained on his throne, but his posture had changed. His hand rested on the armrest, fingers tapping once a small, restless movement. Lirael raised her head and met his gaze directly. She did not beg. She did not lower her eyes. In that single moment of quiet defiance, she chose to hold his stare. Kaelen's jaw tightened. He looked at her for a second longer than necessary before turning his attention back to the court. "Let this be a lesson to every servant in this hall," he said. "No one is above dragon law." Lord Dravener's smile deepened. He rested his hand fully on the hilt of the dagger, as if the sight of her bound beneath the throne pleased him deeply. "The girl has always been troublesome," he said, loud enough for several nobles to hear. "It is good that she is finally being reminded of what she is." Lirael felt the iron cut deeper into her wrists. Warm blood continued to trail down her arms. She focused on the pain, letting it anchor her in the present. The cold stone beneath her knees numbed her skin, but she refused to shift her position. Kaelen glanced at her again. Something unreadable passed through his golden eyes. A flicker of memory, perhaps, or something he did not want the court to see. He pushed it away and spoke once more. "She will remain here until the next moon rises." The court murmured in approval. Some even smiled. Lirael felt their satisfaction, like a second set of chains pressing down on her. She kept her spine straight. The black stone beneath her palms had begun to warm slightly. A faint, almost imperceptible pulse thrummed beneath the rock, slow, ancient, and heavy. She pressed her hands harder against the floor, feeling it answer her touch. No one else seemed to notice. Lord Draven lingered a moment longer, his fingers still resting on the dagger. He looked at her chained form with open satisfaction before finally turning to follow the king. Kaelen descended from the throne and walked past her without another word. But as he passed, his gaze flicked down once more to the blood on her wrists and the way she refused to bow her head even now. Lirael remained kneeling beneath the throne long after the court had dispersed. The iron was cold and heavy on her limbs. The pain in her wrists had become a steady, burning rhythm. She breathed through it, refusing to let her body betray her. The faint red glow of the runes beneath her palms pulsed gently, like a heartbeat that was no longer entirely her own. She closed her eyes for a moment and drew a slow breath. The iron bit deeper into her wrists. She did not regret protecting the boy, not even now. Somewhere far below the black stone, something ancient stirred in response to her blood touching the floor. It had been sleeping for centuries. Now, for the first time, it was listening. Night had fallen over Emberfall Citadel, but the throne hall remained lit by the low-burning dragonfire braziers. Most of the court had long since left. Only a handful of guards stood at the far ends of the hall, their armor glinting in the firelight. Lirael remained kneeling beneath the throne. The iron chains were cold and heavy on her wrists. Every small movement sent sharp, burning pain shooting up her arms. Warm blood had dried in thin trails down her skin, pulling tight whenever she shifted. She kept her spine straight, breathing slowly through the ache. The cold stone beneath her knees had long since numbed her skin, but she refused to move. She was not alone. King Kaelen Draven had returned. He stood at the edge of the dais, looking down at her chained form. The firelight carved sharp shadows across his face. For a long moment, he said nothing. His golden eyes moved from the iron around her wrists to the faint red glow of the runes beneath her palms. Lirael felt his gaze like a physical weight. She pressed her palms flat against the cold black stone, feeling the strange, slow pulse beneath it. It was stronger now, warmer, as if something deep below had begun to breathe in response to her blood. Kaelen finally spoke. His voice was low, meant only for her. "You should have stayed silent." Lirael slowly raised her head. The chains clinked softly. Pain flared in her wrists as the iron bit deeper into her skin. She met his eyes without flinching. "I could not," she said. Kaelen's jaw tightened. He stepped down from the dais and stopped a few paces in front of her. The firelight caught the edges of his armor. "You struck a noble," he said, "in front of the entire court. Do you understand what that means?" Lirael held his gaze. The pain in her wrists pulsed steadily. She tasted copper in her mouth from where she had bitten her cheek earlier. "I understand what it means to watch a child be beaten for spilling wine," she said quietly. Kaelen's eyes narrowed. He took another step closer. Now, he stood directly in front of her chained form. "You have no dragon," he said. "You have no mark. In the eyes of this court, you are nothing. Yet you stood between Lord Draven and a servant boy, as if you had the right to interfere." Lirael felt the cold stone beneath her knees and the warm blood drying on her arms. She drew a slow breath. The pain in her chest tightened for a moment, different from the pain in her wrists. She pushed it down. "I did what was right," she said. For a long moment, Kaelen said nothing. His golden eyes searched hers. Something flickered behind them, a memory he clearly did not want to acknowledge. He looked away first. Lord Draven's voice came from the shadows near one of the pillars. He had been standing there, watching. "You are too soft with her, my king," he said smoothly. "She struck a noble. The punishment is just. Do not let sentiment cloud your judgment. The girl has always been troublesome. It is time she learned her place. Kaelen did not turn to look at his uncle. His eyes remained on Lirael. "Leave us," he said. Lord Dravener's smile thinned, but he bowed his head and withdrew into the corridor. His footsteps faded, though Lirael could still feel his presence lingering like smoke in the air. Kaelen crouched down in front of her. The movement brought him to her eye level. He studied her face, the dried blood on her arms, the way her fingers curled into fists against the stone. "You protected me once," he said quietly. "Years ago, during the hunt. I have not forgotten." Lirael's breath caught. She had not expected him to speak of it. The memory rose unbidden, the arrow whistling through the air, the sharp pain in her shoulder as she threw herself in front of him, the way his young eyes had widened when she fell. She pushed the memory down. Kaelen reached out slowly and touched the iron chain around her wrist. His fingers were warm against the cold metal. He held it for a moment, feeling its weight. "Why did you do it?" he asked. "Why protect the boy?" Lirael looked at him. The pain in her wrists pulsed steadily. She focused on the sensation, letting it keep her present. "Because no one else would," she said. Kaelen's eyes darkened. He released the chain and stood up again. The firelight cast his face in sharp relief. "You are not like the others," he said. It was not a question. Lirael kept her spine straight. The iron was heavy on her limbs. The faint red glow of the runes beneath her palms pulsed gently, like a heartbeat that was no longer entirely her own. She made her choice. She lifted her chin and met his gaze once more. "I never was," she said. Kaelen looked at her for a long moment. Something unreadable passed through his eyes. Then he turned and walked away, his boots echoing against the black stone. Lirael remained kneeling beneath the throne. The chains were cold against her skin. The pain in her wrists had become a constant burning rhythm. She breathed through it, refusing to let her body betray her. The faint red glow of the runes beneath her palms pulsed stronger now. She pressed her hands harder against the stone, feeling the strange, slow pulse answer her touch. Somewhere far below the palace, the ancient thing stirred again. This time, it was listening to the sound of the Dragon King's footsteps fading down the corridor and to the quiet, steady heartbeat of the girl still chained beneath his throne. The night dragged on in heavy silence. Lirael remained kneeling beneath the throne, the iron chains cold and heavy on her wrists. The pain had settled into a deep, throbbing ache that spread from her arms into her shoulders with every small movement. Warm blood had dried in thin trails down her skin, pulling tight whenever she shifted. She kept her spine straight, refusing to let her body betray the exhaustion pulling at her. She was not alone. Lord Dravener stepped out from the shadows near the far pillar. He had been standing there, watching. His silver signet ring caught the firelight as he clasped his hands behind his back. He walked slowly toward her, his boots echoing against the black stone. "You spoke to him," he said, voice smooth and quiet. "Even chained beneath his throne, you still found a way to reach him." Lirael lifted her head. The chains clinked softly. Pain flared in her wrists as the iron bit deeper into her skin. She met his eyes. I answered his question. Lord Dravener stopped a few paces from her. His smile was thin, but his eyes were cold and calculating. "You should be careful, girl. The king has always been sentimental. It would be a shame if that weakness led him to make mistakes that cannot be undone." His fingers brushed the hilt of the dagger at his belt, the same blade he had used years ago to silence those who once questioned his influence over the young king. Some lessons are best learned in silence. Lirael felt the weight of his words settle over her like a second set of chains. She pressed her palms against the cold stone floor, feeling the faint pulse beneath it grow slightly stronger. The red glow of the runes had become more visible now, though still faint. She made her choice. She looked directly at Lord Dravener and spoke. "I will not be silent if he asks me questions." Lord Dravener's smile widened, but it did not reach his eyes. He took one more step closer and lowered his voice. Then you will learn the cost of speaking out of turn, just like the others who once thought they could influence the king." He turned and walked away without another word. His footsteps faded into the corridor, but Lirael could still feel the threat he left behind like smoke in the air. She remained kneeling, the iron heavy on her limbs. The pain in her wrists had become a constant, burning rhythm. She closed her eyes for a moment and breathed through it. A memory surfaced the day she had thrown herself in front of the arrow meant for Kaelen. She had been only a girl then. She still remembered the sharp pain in her shoulder and the way his young hand had gripped hers afterward, tight and shaking. She pushed the memory down. The faint red glow beneath her palms pulsed again. Footsteps echoed from the corridor once more. This time, she recognized them. King Kaelen returned. He walked slowly, as if he had been pacing outside. He stopped at the edge of the dais and looked down at her. The firelight cast his face in sharp relief. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he spoke. "Why did you protect the boy?" Lirael looked up at him. The chains pulled at her wrists. Pain spread through her arms, but she kept her voice steady. "Because he did nothing wrong." Kaelen's golden eyes darkened. He stepped down from the dais and stopped in front of her. This time, he crouched so they were at eye level. He studied her face, the dried blood on her arms, the way her fingers curled into fists against the stone. "You are chained beneath my throne," he said quietly. "You have no power here, no dragon, no title, yet you still speak as if you have the right to judge my court." Lirael held his gaze. She felt the cold stone beneath her knees and the warm blood drying on her arms. She drew a slow breath. "I do not judge your court," she said. "I only refuse to watch the innocent be punished for nothing." Kaelen looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of conflict he could not fully hide. He reached out slowly and touched the iron chain around her wrist. His fingers lingered there, feeling its weight. "You protected me once," he said, voice low. "Years ago, during the hunt. I have not forgotten." Lirael felt the weight of his words settle between them. She did not look away. Kaelen's hand tightened slightly around the chain. For a brief second, his eyes softened just enough for her to see the man beneath the crown. Then the mask returned. He stood up. "Lord Draven believes you are dangerous," he said. "He believes you are trying to weaken me." Lirael kept her spine straight. The pain in her wrists pulsed steadily. "And what do you believe?" she asked. Kaelen looked down at her. The golden light from the braziers flickered across his face. For the first time, he did not have an immediate answer. He simply looked at her chained form, at the way she refused to bow even now. The runes beneath her palms glowed a little brighter. Lirael felt the ancient pulse beneath the stone grow stronger, as if it was listening to their conversation. She pressed her hands harder against the floor, feeling it answer her touch. Kaelen turned to leave, but paused at the edge of the dais. "Tomorrow," he said without looking back, "we will speak again." He walked away, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. Lirael remained kneeling beneath the throne. The chains were heavy on her limbs. The pain in her wrists had become a constant, burning rhythm. She breathed through it, refusing to let her body betray her. The faint red glow beneath her palms pulsed stronger now. Somewhere far below, the ancient thing stirred once more. This time, it was no longer just listening. It was waiting. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the high windows of the throne hall, but the black stone beneath Lirael remained cold. She had not been moved. The iron chains still held her in place beneath the throne, and the pain in her wrists had become a constant, dull throb that spread into her shoulders with every breath. The runes carved into the floor had not stopped glowing. They pulsed with a faint red light, brighter than the night before. No one else seemed to notice. The servants who passed through the hall kept their heads down, avoiding her eyes. Even the guards stationed at the doors looked away whenever she glanced in their direction. Lirael pressed her palms flat against the stone. The warmth beneath it had grown stronger overnight. It was no longer just a faint pulse. It felt like something breathing slowly, deeply, as if waking from a very long sleep. She closed her eyes for a moment. The pain in her wrists flared as she shifted her weight, but she focused on the sensation beneath her hands instead. Something ancient was stirring. She could feel it in the way the air around her seemed heavier, in the way her own heartbeat answered the slow rhythm coming from below. She made her choice. Slowly, she leaned forward and placed both palms fully against the black stone. The chains pulled at her wrists, sending fresh pain shooting up her arms, but she did not pull back. She pressed harder, as if trying to reach whatever was waking beneath her. The runes flared. A low, deep vibration traveled up through the stone and into her body. It was not painful, it was warm, heavy, and strangely familiar. Like a memory she could not quite grasp. For a brief second, an image flashed behind her eyes. A massive dragon with scales the color of midnight, its eyes glowing with ancient fire, looking at her with recognition. Lirael gasped softly and pulled her hands back. The vision vanished as quickly as it had come. Her heart was beating faster now. She felt it in her chest, in the way her breath came shorter. Fear curled cold in her stomach, but underneath it was something else, a strange, quiet pull she could not name. Footsteps echoed from the corridor. King Kaelen entered the hall. He was alone this time. His golden eyes immediately found her, and he stopped at the edge of the dais. He looked at the glowing runes beneath her hands, then at her face. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he spoke. "What did you do?" Lirael looked up at him. The pain in her wrists was sharp, but she kept her voice steady. "I touched the stone." Kaelen's jaw tightened. He descended from the dais and stopped in front of her. His eyes moved between her and the glowing runes. "Those runes have not awakened in centuries," he said quietly. "What did you feel?" Lirael hesitated. She could still feel the warmth lingering in her palms. She could still see the image of the great black dragon behind her eyes. She made another choice. "I felt something," she said. "Something old. It recognized me." Kaelen's golden eyes darkened. He crouched down in front of her, close enough that she could see the tension in his shoulders and the way his hand rested near the hilt of his sword. "Recognized you," he repeated. His voice was low, but there was an edge of something she had not heard from him before unease. Lirael nodded slowly. The chains clinked as she moved. Lord Dravener's voice came from the side of the hall. He had entered quietly, and was now standing near one of the pillars, watching them. "My king," he said, "you should not be alone with her. The runes are reacting to her. This is not natural." Kaelen did not look at his uncle. His eyes stayed on Lirael. "What else did you feel?" he asked. Lirael met his gaze. The fear in her chest was real, but so was the strange, pulling warmth that still lingered in her hands. She drew a slow breath. "It felt like it was waiting for me," she said. Kaelen's hand tightened around the hilt of his sword. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he stood up and took a step back. Lord Dravener moved closer. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "This girl is dangerous, my king. The ancient dragon beneath this palace has been chained for a reason. If she is waking it, we must act before it is too late." Kaelen's golden eyes flicked to his uncle, then back to Lirael. The conflict in him was clear now, the pull between duty and something he could not yet name. Lirael felt the warmth in her palms grow stronger again. She looked down at them. The red glow had spread slightly, forming thin lines that reached toward her chained wrists. Kaelen saw it too. He took another step back, his hand still on his sword. For the first time, there was something close to fear in his eyes, not fear of her, but fear of what she might awaken. Lirael kept her hands on the stone. The ancient thing beneath the palace was no longer just stirring. It was reaching for her, and for the first time since she had been chained, Lirael felt both terror and a strange, undeniable pull in her chest, as if something deep inside her was finally beginning to remember who she was. The runes beneath Lirael's palms continued to glow with a soft red light. She kept her hands pressed against the black stone, feeling the slow, heavy warmth rising from below. It no longer felt like a distant pulse. It felt like something breathing, something vast and ancient that had finally noticed her. King Kaelen stood a few paces away, his golden eyes fixed on the glowing runes. His hand still rested near the hilt of his sword, but he had not drawn it. For a long moment, he simply watched her. Lirael felt his gaze on her skin. The pain in her wrists was constant, but she focused instead on the strange warmth spreading from the stone into her palms. It was not painful, it was heavy, almost comforting, like a memory she could not quite reach. Kaelen finally spoke. "What did you see when you touched it?" Lirael looked up at him. The firelight from the braziers cast his face in sharp relief. She could see the tension in his shoulders and the way his fingers flexed slightly against his sword hilt. "I saw a dragon," she said quietly. "A great black one. Its eyes were like fire. It looked at me as if it knew me." Kaelen's jaw tightened. He took one step closer, then stopped. "That dragon has been sealed beneath this palace for 1,000 years, he said. "My ancestors bound it there. No one has been able to reach it since." Lirael felt the warmth in her palms grow stronger. She drew a slow breath. The pain in her wrists flared for a moment, but she did not pull her hands away from the stone. "It reached for me," she said. Kaelen looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his eyes, not quite fear, but a deep, unsettled curiosity. He crouched down so they were closer in height. The golden threads of the bond that had appeared the day before were gone, but something else lingered between them now, something heavier and more dangerous. "Why you?" he asked. His voice was low, almost rough. "You have no dragon mark. You were born without one. Why would it answer you?" Lirael met his gaze. She could feel the ancient presence beneath the stone growing stronger, as if it was listening to their words. She made her choice. She leaned forward slightly, pressing both palms harder against the black stone. The runes flared brighter in response. Pain shot up her arms from the iron chains, but she did not flinch. "I don't know," she said, "but it's waking because of me, and I think it wants something from me." Kaelen's golden eyes darkened. He reached out slowly and touched the chain around her wrist again. His fingers were warm against the cold iron. For a moment, he simply held it, as if testing the weight of it. Lord Dravener's voice came from the side of the hall. He had returned quietly, and was now standing near the pillar again, watching them with cold eyes. "My king," he said, "you should not be this close to her. The dragon is reacting. If it breaks free, it will destroy everything." Kaelen did not turn to look at his uncle. His eyes stayed on Lirael. His thumb brushed once across the back of her hand, where it touched the chain, a small, unconscious movement. Lirael felt it like a spark against her skin. The warmth from the stone spread up her arms and into her chest. For a brief second, the pain in her wrists faded, replaced by something older and warmer. She made another choice. She turned her hand slightly so her fingers could brush against his. The chains rattled. She looked up at him, letting him see the fear and the strange, undeniable pull she felt. "I'm not afraid of it," she said quietly. "Not the way you are." Kaelen's eyes widened slightly. His hand stayed near hers. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Lord Dravener's voice cut through the silence, sharper now. "My king, step away from her. Now." Kaelen's jaw tightened. He looked at Lirael for one more second, something raw and conflicted flickering in his golden eyes. Then he slowly stood up and stepped back. But he did not move far. Lirael kept her hands on the stone. The runes glowed brighter beneath her palms. The ancient presence below was no longer just stirring, it was reaching. She could feel it in her chest now, a heavy, pulling warmth that made her breath catch. It was not pain, it was recognition. And for the first time since she had been chained beneath the throne, Lirael felt both fear and a dangerous kind of hope rising in her at the same time. Kaelen stood above her, his hand still near his sword, but his eyes no longer looked at her like she was only a servant. Lord Draven watched them both from the shadows, his fingers slowly tracing the hilt of his dagger, and beneath the black stone, the ancient dragon continued to wake. Lord Draven did not leave the hall. He remained near the pillar, his silver signet ring catching the firelight as he watched Lirael and King Kaelen. His eyes were cold, calculating. After a long moment, he spoke again. "My king," he said, voice smooth but carrying an edge. "The court is growing restless. Rumors are already spreading about the runes beneath the throne. If you continue to show mercy to this girl, they will begin to question your strength." Kaelen turned slowly to face his uncle. His golden eyes were hard, but Lirael could see the tension in his shoulders and the way his hand stayed near his sword. "This is not about mercy," Kaelen said. "This is about truth." Lord Draven's smile was thin. He took a few steps closer, his boots echoing against the black stone. "The truth is that this girl is waking something that should have remained buried. The ancient dragon beneath this palace was chained for a reason. Our ancestors knew the danger it posed. If she continues to reach for it, she may destroy everything we have built." Lirael felt the warmth from the stone beneath her palms growing stronger. The red glow of the runes had spread further, thin lines of light reaching toward her chained wrists. Pain throbbed in her arms, but she did not pull her hands away. She made her choice. She lifted her head and looked directly at Lord Draven. "You are afraid," she said quietly. "Not of the dragon. You are afraid of what it might say when it wakes." Lord Draven's eyes narrowed. For the first time, a flicker of real anger crossed his face. He stepped closer, stopping just beyond the glowing runes. "Careful, girl," he said, voice low. "You are already in chains. Do not make things worse for yourself." Kaelen moved slightly, placing himself between Lirael and his uncle. The golden light from the runes cast shadows across his face. "Enough," he said. "She stays where she is until I decide otherwise." Lord Draven looked at his nephew for a long moment. Then he smiled again, but it was cold and empty. "As you wish, my king. But the court will not remain patient forever, and neither will I." He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. But Lirael could feel that he had not truly left. He was only waiting for the right moment. Kaelen remained standing in front of her. He looked down at the glowing runes, then at her chained hands. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he spoke, his voice quieter. "What is happening to you?" Lirael met his gaze. The pain in her wrists was sharp, but she kept her voice steady. "I don't know," she said, "but it's not trying to hurt me. It feels like it's remembering me." Kaelen's jaw tightened. He reached out slowly and touched the iron chain around her wrist again. His fingers were warm against the cold metal. "My ancestors sealed that dragon away because it was too powerful," he said. "They feared what it would do if it ever woke. If it is answering you now, then perhaps they were right to fear it." Lirael felt the warmth from the stones spread up her arms. It was no longer just heat, it carried something else. A faint echo of something ancient and vast. She drew a slow breath. "Or perhaps they were wrong to chain it in the first place," she said. Kaelen's golden eyes darkened. He did not release the chain. His thumb brushed once across the back of her hand, a small, unconscious movement that sent a strange warmth through the pain in her wrists. Lord Draven's voice echoed from the corridor, speaking to someone outside. Lirael could not hear the words clearly, but she could hear the tone sharp, commanding. Kaelen's hand tightened slightly around the chain. "He will not stop," he said quietly. "My uncle has wanted control for a long time. If he believes you are a threat to that control, he will find a way to remove you." Lirael looked up at him. The pain in her chest, different from the pain in her wrists, tightened. She could feel the ancient presence below, growing stronger with every passing moment. She made another choice. She turned her hand slightly so her fingers could curl around his where he held the chain. The iron was cold, but his skin was warm. "Then let him try," she said. "I am not afraid of him." Kaelen looked at her for a long moment. Something raw flickered in his golden eyes, conflict, fear, and something deeper he was clearly trying to bury. He did not pull his hand away. Outside the hall, footsteps approached. Several sets. Lord Draven was returning, and he was not alone. Lirael felt the warmth from the stone surge suddenly. The runes beneath her palms flared brighter, casting red light across the floor. Pain flared in her wrists, sharp and hot, but she did not let go of Kaelen's hand. The ancient dragon beneath the palace was no longer just waking. It was listening, and it was angry. Lord Draven returned with several more guards. Their armor clinked softly as they entered the throne hall. He stopped a few paces from where Lirael knelt beneath the throne, his silver signet ring gleaming on his finger. "My king," he said, voice calm but carrying through the hall. "The court has heard the rumors. They are waiting outside. It is time to address this matter publicly before it grows out of control." King Kaelen did not release Lirael's hand. The golden light from the runes beneath her palms cast a red glow across the black stone floor. He looked at his uncle for a long moment, then at the guards standing behind him. "This is not a matter for the court," he said. Lord Draven's smile was thin. "On the contrary, the entire kingdom will feel it if that creature beneath us wakes. The people have a right to know what is happening." Kaelen's jaw tightened. He glanced down at Lirael. She met his eyes without looking away. The pain in her wrists was sharp, but she kept her spine straight. She made her decision. She turned her head slightly and spoke loud enough for the guards to hear. "Let them come," she said. "Let them see what their king has chained beneath his throne." Kaelen's golden eyes widened slightly. For a brief second, something like pride flickered across his face before he masked it again. He gave a small nod. "Open the doors," he ordered. The guards hesitated, then moved to obey. The heavy doors at the end of the hall swung open. Nobles and officials began to file in, their voices low with curiosity and unease. They stopped when they saw the glowing runes on the floor, and the girl chained beneath the throne. Whispers spread quickly through the growing crowd. Lord Draven stepped forward, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "This girl has done something to the ancient seals beneath the palace. The runes are awakening. If we do not act, the dragon sealed below may break free and destroy us all." A wave of fear rippled through the court. Some nobles stepped back. Others stared at Lirael with open suspicion. Lirael felt their stares like needles on her skin. The pain in her wrists throbbed with every heartbeat. She pressed her palms harder against the black stone. The warmth beneath it surged in response. She made another choice. She slowly rose to her feet, even though the chains pulled at her wrists and shoulders. The movement sent fresh pain shooting through her arms, but she did not lower her head. She stood as straight as the iron allowed and looked out at the court. Kaelen moved with her, still holding her hand through the chain. He stood beside her, tall and unyielding. Lirael drew a slow breath. The pain in her chest was deep and pulling, but she spoke clearly. "I did not wake the dragon," she said. "It woke because it heard the truth, because it remembers what your ancestors did." The court fell silent. Lord Draven's face darkened. He took a step forward. "This is madness," he said. "She is trying to turn the court against the crown." "Seize her!" Two guards moved toward Lirael. Kaelen stepped in front of her, his free hand going to his sword. The golden light from the runes flared brighter, casting sharp shadows across the hall. "Touch her," he said, voice low and dangerous, "and you will answer to me." The guard stopped. Lirael felt the warmth from the stone surge upward through her body. It was no longer just heat. It carried something ancient and powerful. The pain in her wrists faded for a moment as the energy moved through her. She made her final choice in that moment. She turned to face the court fully and spoke again, her voice steady and clear. "The dragon beneath this palace was not sealed because it was dangerous," she said. "It was sealed because it refused to let kings enslave dragons. Your ancestors broke that oath. Now it has come to collect what is owed." The runes beneath her feet suddenly flared violently. A deep, earth-shaking roar erupted from below the black stone. The entire hall trembled. Cracks spread across the floor as the ancient dragon beneath the palace began to rise. Screams filled the hall. Nobles pushed back in panic. Guards raised their weapons. Lirael stood her ground, even as the stone beneath her feet split open. She could feel the dragon's rage and its ancient power flooding upward. It was no longer just listening. It was coming. Kaelen pulled her closer, his hand still locked around hers. His golden eyes were wide, but he did not let go. Lord Dravener's face had gone pale. He stepped back, his hand tightening around the hilt of his dagger. The black stone in front of the throne cracked wide open. A massive, clawed hand emerged from the darkness below, followed by a head covered in ancient black scales. One glowing eye opened and fixed directly on Lirael. The ancient dragon's voice rumbled through the hall, deep and ancient, shaking the very air. "Mother." The entire court fell to their knees in shock and terror. Lirael stood frozen, her hand still in Kaelen's, as the dragon she had never known rose from beneath the throne and called her by a name she did not understand. And in that moment, with the court staring in horror and the Dragon King at her side, Lirael felt both terror and a strange, undeniable sense of coming home. The ancient dragon's head rose from the cracked black stone, scales the color of midnight catching the red glow of the runes. Its single visible eye burned like molten gold as it fixed on Lirael. The word it had spoken still echoed through the hall. "Mother." Screams and gasps filled the throne hall. Nobles stumbled backward. Some fell to their knees. Others pressed against the walls, eyes wide with terror. The guards, who had been advancing on Lirael, now stood frozen, their swords half raised. Lirael remained standing, her hand still locked with Kaelen's through the iron chain. The pain in her wrists was sharp and constant, but she barely felt it anymore. The warmth from the stone beneath her feet had spread through her entire body, heavy, ancient, and strangely familiar. It was not just power, it was recognition. She made her choice. She stepped forward, pulling slightly against the chains, and looked directly at the massive dragon. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "I am not your mother," she said, "but I remember you." The dragon's eye narrowed. It shifted, and more of its body rose from the darkness below. One enormous claw gripped the edge of the broken floor. The entire hall trembled. King Kaelen stood beside her, his golden eyes never leaving the beast. His hand tightened around hers. For the first time since the ritual began, he looked at Lirael not as a servant, but as something far more dangerous and precious. Lord Dravener's voice cut through the chaos. He had backed away to the edge of the dais, but his face was twisted with fury. "This is sorcery," he shouted. "She has summoned the beast. Seize her before it destroys us all." Several guards moved forward again, though their steps were hesitant. Lirael felt the rage rise in her chest, not just her own, but something older that flowed through the bond with the dragon. The pain in her wrists flared as she pulled against the chains. She turned to face the court, her voice clear and steady. "I did not summon it," she said. "It woke because your king's bloodline broke an oath. An oath made by the first Dragon King to never enslave dragons. Your ancestors broke that promise. Now the dragon has come to judge. The ancient dragon let out a low, rumbling growl that shook the pillars. Its glowing eye moved from Lirael to King Kaelen, then to Lord Draven. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop. Kaelen stepped forward with Lirael, still holding her hand. He looked out at the terrified court, then at his uncle. "She speaks the truth," he said. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "I have felt the weight of that broken oath my entire life. The dragons have grown weaker under our rule. This is not her doing. It is ours." Lord Draven's face twisted. He drew the ceremonial dagger from his belt, the same blade his ancestors had used to bind dragons. "You are weak, nephew," he spat. "Just like your father. If you will not protect this kingdom, then I will." He lunged toward Lirael. Kaelen moved instantly, pulling her behind him. But Lirael did not hide. She stepped forward again, raising her chained hands. The runes beneath her feet flared violently. The ancient dragon roared a sound so deep it rattled the bones of everyone in the hall. The dragon's massive claw slammed down onto the floor between Lirael and Lord Draven. The impact sent cracks spiderwebbing across the black stone. Draven stumbled back, eyes wide with real fear for the first time. Lirael stood her ground. She could feel the dragon's rage and its ancient grief flowing through her. It was not here to destroy blindly. It was here to judge. She made another choice. She turned to face the court fully, even as the dragon loomed behind her. The chains on her wrists clinked as she raised her hands. "I am not here to take your throne," she said, voice carrying over the terrified murmurs. "But I will not let you continue breaking the oath that was made when dragons were first given souls. Decide now, will you stand with the truth, or with the lie that has weakened you for generations?" The court was silent. King Kaelen stepped forward and stood beside her. He looked out at his people, then at the massive dragon behind them. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he turned to Lirael. His golden eyes were filled with conflict, fear, and something deeper, something that had been growing since the day he first saw her chained beneath his throne. He reached out and gently touched the iron chain around her wrist. His voice was quiet, meant only for her. "I choose you," he said. "Whatever comes next, I choose you." Lirael felt the words settle in her chest like warm light. The pain in her wrists was still there, but it no longer felt like chains. It felt like proof that she had survived. Lord Draven's face had gone pale. He took another step back, the dagger trembling slightly in his hand. The guards around him looked uncertain, their loyalty clearly shaken. The ancient dragon watched them all in silence, its glowing eye moving slowly across the hall. Lirael stood beside the Dragon King, her hand still in his, the massive beast rising behind them like a living shadow. The power in the room had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Lord Draven's eyes burned with cold fury as he looked at the two of them standing together. He raised the dagger slightly, as if considering one last desperate move. But before he could act, the dragon let out another low, warning growl. Lirael felt the ancient presence in her chest grow heavier. The pain and the power mixed together, making her breath catch. She looked at Kaelen. He looked back at her, and in that moment, with the court watching in stunned silence and the ancient dragon looming over them, Lirael knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The ancient dragon's glowing eye moved slowly across the hall, taking in every face. Its massive claw rested on the cracked black stone, and the low rumble of its breathing filled the silence like distant thunder. The golden threads of power that had flared between Lirael and King Kaelen now pulsed steadily, connecting them even as the entire court watched in stunned silence. Lord Draven stood near the edge of the dais, the ceremonial dagger still in his hand. His face had lost its usual calm. His eyes burned with cold fury as he looked at Lirael. "This ends now," he said, voice low but carrying. He raised the dagger and pointed it at her. "She has awakened the beast. If we do not kill her, it will destroy us all." Several guards shifted uneasily, but none moved forward. The dragon's presence was too overwhelming. Lirael felt the weight of every stair in the hall. The pain in her wrists was sharp and constant, the iron still cutting into her skin. Warm blood had begun to trickle down her arms again. She kept her spine straight, but inside, fear and something heavier twisted in her chest. She made her choice. She stepped forward, still holding Kaelen's hand, and faced the massive dragon directly. The golden threads between her and the king stretched and glowed brighter as she moved. "I am not your enemy," she said, her voice steady despite the pain and the fear clawing at her ribs. "But I will not let you destroy this kingdom because of an oath my ancestors made." The dragon's eye narrowed. It shifted slightly, and the floor trembled beneath its weight. When it spoke again, its voice rolled through the hall like deep stone grinding against stone. The oath was broken. The bloodline must answer. Kaelen stepped forward with her, his hand tightening around hers. His golden eyes were filled with conflict, but he did not let go. "Then let me answer," he said. "I am the current king. The sins of my bloodline are mine to carry." The dragon's gaze moved to him. For a long moment it said nothing. Then it spoke again. "You have enslaved what was never meant to be owned. You have broken what your first ancestor swore to protect. The girl carries my blood in her veins. She is the mother reborn. She must choose." Lirael's breath caught. The words hit her like a physical blow. She had always known she was different, but hearing it spoken aloud by the ancient dragon itself made everything feel suddenly real and terrifying. She felt Kaelen's hand tremble slightly against hers. When she looked at him, she saw the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for what this choice might mean for his people. Lord Draven saw the hesitation and seized it. "She will choose to destroy us," he shouted. "Look at her. She has already turned the dragon against us. If you let her live, she will hand this kingdom to the beast." Several nobles shouted in agreement. Fear was spreading fast through the court. Lirael felt despair rise in her chest like cold water. She had come so far. She had spoken the truth. She had stood beside Kaelen, but now the ancient dragon was demanding a judgment she was not sure she could give. She made her decision. She turned to face the dragon fully, still holding Kaelen's hand. The pain in her wrists burned, but she ignored it. She looked up at the massive creature that had called her mother and spoke clearly. "I will not let you erase his bloodline," she said, "but I will not let him continue the sins of his ancestors either." The dragon's eye glowed brighter. "Then what do you choose, daughter of the first blood?" Lirael felt Kaelen's hand tighten around hers. She could feel his heartbeat through the golden thread steady, but filled with fear and something deeper. She drew a slow breath. The pain in her chest was almost unbearable now, but she forced the words out. "I choose balance," she said. "The dragons will no longer be enslaved, but neither will they destroy the kingdom that was built on their strength. The oath will be remade, not broken, and not used as a weapon." The ancient dragon was silent for a long moment. The entire court held its breath. Then it spoke again, its voice quieter but no less powerful. "The choice is made, but the price must still be paid." Before anyone could react, Lord Draven moved. He lunged forward with the dagger raised, aiming straight for Lirael's back. His face was twisted with desperation and hatred. Kaelen reacted instantly, pulling her behind him, but Lirael did not hide. She turned and raised her chained hands. The golden threads between her and Kaelen flared violently. The ancient dragon roared. A blast of heat and power surged from the cracked stone beneath them. It struck Lord Draven mid-lunge, throwing him backward. He crashed into the dais, the dagger clattering from his hand. He gasped for breath. eyes wide with shock and pain. The court erupted into chaos once more. Lirael felt the power surge through her body and then fade, leaving her knees weak. Kaelen caught her before she could fall, his arms strong around her. She leaned into him for a moment, breathing hard. The pain in her wrists was worse now, but she forced herself to stay upright. Lord Draven pushed himself up slowly, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. His eyes burned with pure hatred as he looked at them. "This is not over," he rasped. Kaelen's voice was cold and final. "It is for you," he signaled the guards. This time, they moved without hesitation and seized Lord Draven, dragging him away as he shouted curses. The ancient dragon watched it all in silence. Then it spoke one last time, its voice echoing through the hall. "The oath is remade, but the mother must remain, or the bloodline will fall." It slowly began to sink back into the darkness beneath the cracked stone. The red glow of the runes faded until only faint lines remained. Lirael stood in the center of the hall, still chained, still bleeding, with Kaelen's arm around her. The court stared at her in a mixture of fear, awe, and uncertainty. She had made her choice. Now, she had to live with what came next. And as the ancient dragon disappeared back into the depths, Lirael felt both despair and a fragile, burning hope rise in her chest at the same time. The ancient dragon had returned to the darkness beneath the black stone, but the hall still trembled with its presence. Cracks ran across the floor like veins, and the faint red glow of the runes lingered around Lirael's chained wrists. The court remained frozen in stunned silence. Many still on their knees. King Kaelen Draven stood beside her, his hand still holding hers through the iron chain. He looked out at the gathered nobles and guards, his golden eyes steady despite the exhaustion clear on his face. He made his choice. He turned to Lirael and, in front of everyone, slowly knelt. The sound of his armor against the stone echoed through the hall. Gasps rippled through the court. Even the guards lowered their weapons. Kaelen looked up at her, still holding her chained hand. His voice was quiet but carried clearly. "You were chained beneath my throne as punishment," he said. "But it is I who should be kneeling before you." Lirael felt the words settle in her chest like warm light. The pain in her wrists was sharp and constant, blood still warm against her skin, but she did not pull her hand away. She looked down at him, the Dragon King, on his knees before her, and felt something inside her finally begin to loosen. She made her choice. She reached out with her free hand and gently touched his face. Her fingers trembled slightly from exhaustion and pain, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Stand up, Kaelen," she said. "We face this together." He rose slowly, never releasing her hand. When he stood again, he turned to face the court. "Lord Draven will be tried for his crimes," he announced, "and from this day forward, no dragon will be enslaved under my rule. The oath that was broken will be remade not by force, but by choice." He looked back at Lirael. His golden eyes were softer now, filled with something he no longer tried to hide. "This woman," he said, "kept me alive when my own blood tried to kill me. She carried the weight of my life in silence while others plotted in the shadows. She is not dragonless. She is the Mother reborn, and she is mine, to protect not as a servant, but as my equal." Lirael felt tears sting her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not yet. The pain in her wrists throbbed with every heartbeat, a reminder of everything she had endured. She squeezed Kaelen's hand gently. The court remained silent, but the fear in their eyes had begun to shift into something else, awe, and perhaps the first fragile seeds of respect. Later, in the quiet of the royal chambers, the chains had finally been removed. Lirael sat by the window, watching the first light of dawn touch the distant mountains. Her wrists were wrapped in clean bandages, but the pain remained a deep, familiar ache, that she knew would never fully leave her. Kaelen knelt before her once more, this time without an audience. He gently took her bandaged hands in his and pressed his forehead against them. "I should have seen you sooner," he said, voice rough with emotion. "I should have questioned the chains my ancestors placed on both dragons and people." Lirael ran her fingers through his hair, feeling the strands between her fingers. She could still feel the faint warmth of the ancient bond between them. Quieter now, but steady. "You see me now," she said softly. "That is enough." Kaelen looked up at her. His golden eyes were filled with something she had waited years to see, love that had been earned through pain, truth, and choice. "I will spend the rest of my life proving it," he said. Lirael leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. The pain in her wrists was still there, but so was something warmer, something that felt like healing. Outside, the kingdom was waking to a new reality. Lord Draven was in chains. The ancient dragon had returned to its slumber, but its presence could still be felt in the cracks beneath the palace. Healing would take time. Trust would need to be rebuilt. But for the first time in her life, Lirael did not feel alone beneath the weight of it all. She closed her eyes and breathed in the quiet morning air. Kaelen's hand remained in hers, warm, steady, and real. The pain would remain, but so would the choice they had made, and that, she decided, was enough to begin again.